Hornet isn't Void, the player character isn't the Pale King, and you are not the Hollow Knight. These are well-trodden conversations in the Hollow Knight theory community that are virtually accepted as fact. With over 5 years under its belt, a roiling cult following, and an upcoming sequel, there isn't much left to theorize on when it comes to Hollow Knight lore, despite many questions being left open by Team Cherry. But what if today I brought something new to the table? A question that perhaps no one has asked aside from me. What if Lurien is Void? Alright, bear with me here. As the scribe for this video, I'll openly admit that it sounds a bit like a crack theory at first glance. However, after lining up my thoughts, I personally am very attached to this idea. A lot of Hollow Knight lore videos tend to heavily lean on dialogue and visual motifs to support their ideas, and there is very little of that backing up what I have to say. Instead, we'll be talking a lot more about character motifs and story parallels. And of course, spoiler warning for the entire late game of Hollow Knight. Lurien is a devout, near-obsessive personality who is dedicated to the Pale King and the Kingdom of Hallownest, particularly the City of Tears, which he watches over. Like the other dreamers, little is detailed about him as to leave his story up in the air. However, I can't help but notice some of the similarities between him and the Collector. The Collector is also an obsessive personality, living in a locked tower. The Collector is notably implied to have a relationship with the King's Mold, due to their analogous biology. Bipedal, quad-armed creatures that are either visibly or in text said to be made out of void. In the case of Lurien, we never see his forelimbs. The brief glance we get under his cloak when beating him into smithereens is vaguely dark and unmarked. It isn't unlike the shape of the King's Molds outside their armor, sure. But it also isn't unlike several other provably not void bugs in Hallownest. Additionally, Lurien is the only character we see implied to just have one eye, unless he has two front-facing tiny eyes or a mask hole just for shoveling Cheetos into. I would like to presume that the singular mask hole means he's uniquely cycloptic. So, how can we explain Lurien's biology? With a blank canvas and a few known facts, I'd like to paint a picture that ties all of this together neatly. In the King's experiments to give form to Void, he created a number of Void being prototypes, one of whom being the Collector. The Collector was originally instilled with a singular task: preserve Hallownest. Being a flawed creation, this results in the demeanor we see in the Collector and his obsession with trapping creatures in jars, dead or alive. Unsatisfied with this, the King throws it into a locked tower and moves on to create the next prototype. This time he instills the creature with the task of watching over Hallownest. With an improved demeanor, much gratitude and obedience for its creator, and a flawed body, the King allows this void being much more freedom and even gives it a mask and the name Lurien. Finally, after tinkering with Void further, the King produces a being with one simple idea instilled: serve. They are obedient, devout, servile, and physically stable. Thus, the King mass produces and armors them to create the King's Molds. There's also the curious fact that between the three dreamers, both Monomon and Lurien have a seal of binding over their sleeping bodies. So what if instead of being a seal to protect the dreamers from attackers, they were instead seals to help keep unstable dreamer forms in check? Out of the three, Hera is the only one who we can assure is a natural-born bug, due to her body having very typical insect elements visually. In the case of Monomon, she isn't exactly the traditional Hallownest bug. She is something akin to the jellyfish creatures, and before Quirrell returns with her mask, her physical body appears somewhat incomplete. It's known that she willingly gave her mask to Quirrell, and the masks are implied to give bugs some form of higher thinking or agency above raw instinct. So perhaps the seal is there to preserve her in some capacity while her mask is away. Footnote: special thanks to Ccmaci I for their video Every Mask in Hollow Knight Explained, which is the origin of this particular sub-theory. Meanwhile, if Lurien was Void, then perhaps he has a seal on him to keep his Void body in check. We can see from the corpse we get the love key off of, they have streaks of Void substance coming from the eyes, just like other bugs that perish close to the Void. It's implied that this royal became as one with the Collector due to lots of time together and was likely infected with the Void to some extent. It could be for a similar reason that Lurien is given a seal. If the collector is unstable enough to leak void onto others, then Lurien could be as well without the proper protection. Now, this theory isn't without flaws. Something I find interesting is that Lurien is referred to as he, wherein every single other confirmed void creature is referred to as genderless or never otherwise gendered. The exception to this is if you believe Zote is also a sibling born of void, then he would be one example of a gendered void being. However, Zote is a bit of a gray area in general, and it's hard to prove that he is a sibling. That about wraps up my theory. If you or another creator have anything to add to this line of thinking, I'd love to hear it. Please comment below. And of course, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, thanks for watching.